my wish to become a painter, maybe I was 14 years old. Yes, it came slowly. But then later it was my only possibility. My mother, she gave me an atmosphere of culture. She was very interested in literature and music. She was a bit proud that her son, her only son, is interested in these nice things. My father was in the war, and so he couldn't have any influence. And after the war, he was in prison. I tried to become closer to my father later. Because of the war and all the circumstances, there was a big distance, and I was not interested to hear anything from him or to learn anything. Later, this was the marriage of my sister, and he was a bit drunk, and it was a funny day. So I made this snapshot, and then much later I painted it because it was so funny, like a clown. When you see every day all these photographs in the newspapers and magazines, and you see how important, much more important they are than any painting, I could say this so polemically at that time, then you feel the wish to take it, to work with this, to get something of this attraction. Yeah, it was the only way to get rid of this heavy tradition to be a painter, to make new things what is more interesting. And all these little photographs had a special truth, and you looked at, and it was so interesting. I thought a painting should have at least the same fascination. Yeah, of course, I was supported by these movements like pop art and fluxus. I had a sympathetic feeling for these little pictures, and I thought it's a pity that you forget them immediately. Some, the best and most interesting one, I should paint in oil, and then they come in the museum. Many people will, for many years, look at this little cheap, dirty, banal photograph. Yeah. For some time we were called the German pop artists. I was not so satisfied with this terminus, but of course it had an influence and gave us a help that is, yeah, it helped us.
There was a touch of contestation and difficulty in Richter's personality and in Richter's work at that time. And certainly after the famous or notorious demonstration for capitalist realism, which was one of the events that he staged with Konrad Fischer at the time, there was this aura of an equivalent to the radicality or the subversion or the mockery of pop art in the context of Richter's work as well. And people knew that Richter was going to be a very important artist, and he was already at that time an important artist.
I never wanted to become a photographer, but I always was interested in photography. Yeah. I'm making a lot of photographs in the past, more than now, but still a lot. And then I try to bring them, to make a choice, a selection. And that's what I'm trying here, to see what I did, how they look in a piece of paper here. It's very different to the landscape where they come from. And then we will see what happens. Could be a painting, or it could be nothing, or a nice page in an album. In 4 years I know it. So that would be the normal way.
What Richter gives us is pop imagery with a kind of chill on it. People may speculate that he's talking about the dark side of pop culture, the dark side of celebrity. But when I look at the paintings, I'm not drawn into that kind of thought, that kind of feeling. There's that photograph, and then there's that kind of way he treats it. Sometimes with the smear, that kind of gray smear effect.
Yeah, it was an exciting time. It was possible to provoke people. Today is harder. They have a thicker skin. Automatically, when you paint and make a drawing from anybody, you start to deform forms, and I want to see the real, not a drawing. That to paint without a photograph is automatically, you do it in the wrong way, in a stylish way or deformed, I don't know, yeah. I like women. That's one thing. And of course, it was the best way to paint women in this photographic style. It was modern and interesting. I could show the truth, so-called truth, but much more truth than when I had a woman from my imagination.
It's a particular description of how we perceive, how we apprehend the world. It's not just an emotional statement. And therefore, he gives you as much of the truth about the image as he can give you without beginning to fool you into thinking that you have the whole of it.
The reason I put the blurring was, first, I could paint it much faster. And a big advantage was it didn't look like a painting. You couldn't see this texture of brush strokes and so on, this artistic, very typical painterly method. And it set the surface like a photograph. When you see now these things, they don't look like as perfect as at that time we had the feeling, because it was in contrast to the paintings, looked it perfect and without strokes.
Basically, he seems to be locked in, guided, controlled by the photograph. And I find it immensely frustrating, because when I go to a painter, I want to be in a relationship with the painter and what that painter is doing.
The 48 portraits is one of the chefs-d'œuvre in Richter's career, in my mind. These are small images that he selected from a dictionary, the most random process and the most banal source, once again, that you can imagine. It's clearly a panorama of figures that emphasize the persistence of European culture in its most differentiated forms. Since they're all found portraits, they are all figures of some major repute, so they don't have the structure of banality that the found amateur photographs have. They have the banality of the dictionary, but not the pictures themselves or not the sitters themselves.
Baader Meinhof subject was a lot of different reasons. Maybe the most surprising thing was that for the people, for the public, that I did it, because I was more known for a bourgeois than a sympathisant with this group. I never was left-wing and I never was a Marxist and so on. It's long ago and there are a lot of interpretations and explanations. I'm not able to give a real nice construct of why I painted and what happened at that time and so on. I cannot.
Now, in making the 18 October 1977 paintings about the Baader Meinhof group, these are paintings about ambivalence in the sense that he is not a man of the left. He had no sympathy with the political recommendations or methods of the Baader Meinhof group. He was not creating martyr portraits to a revolutionary ideal. But he was ambivalent about them because they did represent to him, I mean the individuals in particular, the women in particular, Ulrike Meinhof, who was nearly his age, they did represent to him a certain kind of desperate craving for change, a certain idealism that he never thought could come to a good end, but he nonetheless admired the spirit and the bravery that went into it before it turned sour. And so he was, in a sense, painting the human predicament of his generation.
The Baader Meinhof paintings, I frankly have no idea what he feels about these people. And I can neither get excited nor incensed about them, really. They're these kind of elegant black and white, blurry compositions. And then they're supposed to get your mind thinking about terrorism, the left, the right, state control of people, jail, not jail, suicide, not suicide. But your mind is spinning in ways that, for my money, have very little to do with what you're actually seeing in those paintings.
Okay. That's it? You got it? It's fine.